Hello, friends. I'm David Hale. Welcome to Soul Shift Coaching, where I am passing on that which has freely been given me. That is, for the last 18 and a half years, living a transformed life with a transformed mindset, learning true freedom, understanding true peace, and applying both peace and freedom through the lens of daily discipline and reaping that radical harvest on the other side of discipline, which is transformation. And that's what I want for you. And that's what I'm called to pass on. And so that's what we're doing here at Soul Shift Coaching by David Hale. Please feel free to go check me out at soulshift.org. Well, my most recent video was my most successful one so far. Thank you for that. And that video dealt with a ubiquitous fact, a reality that no one can get away from. And that is that dysfunction is generational. We're all born into a dysfunctional system. The simple question is, to which degree? Some of us were blessed to have minimal dysfunction in our family, and then some of us, through no fault of our own, were born into a significantly dysfunctional system, and everywhere in between, because no one gets out of here without that simple fact. And that should bring comfort to us. It should actually buoy our courage. It should actually motivate us to say, okay, well, if I'm not alone here, maybe I can seek out some people that had similar experiences, or maybe the experiences look different, but maybe they all felt the same, because pain is pain. And so what I want to do in this video is drill down a little bit further into this idea, this reality, this fact that we're all born into a family of dysfunction. Well, one of the first things that we also need to understand is that I have lied to myself far more than anyone else. And I humbly suggest to you that you're in that same boat, that all of the covenants, all of the contracts, all of the promises that we've made with ourselves, whether big or small, we've broken far more of those than we have with anyone else. And so understanding that we can sell ourselves short, and that we do sell ourselves short, is one of the first steps that we should take when we are assessing the family in which we grew up. Because guess what? The people that raised you, they're the exact same. The people that raised you also lied to themselves more than anyone else. And it doesn't matter if it's a mom and or dad, auntie, grandma, uncle, everywhere in between. We are all imperfect people, and we are all therefore falling short, sometimes big, sometimes small, but there is definitely a falling short. And what that does is that because we bring that with us, because that's so ingrained in us, because no one gets out of here without falling short, it is impossible for us not to pass that on. And so one of the first steps, like I said, in unpacking, in investigating this system of dysfunction that we were born into, is first acknowledging how right here, right now, I am falling short in so many different ways. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a bad person and I'm a failure and all that stuff. No, there's just a simple, honest humility that goes along with understanding and accepting and admitting and acknowledging that I fall short all the time. And so once I can come to that reality and look at myself in the eye, look at myself in the mirror and say, yes, I have fallen short here, here, and here, big and small and everywhere in between. What that will hopefully do is soften the edges of how we look back at our system of dysfunction. It should soften the edges around the tight box that we often view those people that raised us, especially if they hurt us. And what does that hurt look like? Well, it can take on myriad forms, many, many different forms and ways. But what happens is if they've hurt us, maybe it's neglect, maybe it's abandonment, maybe they were there but really weren't there. Some of us grew up in a home of addiction, if you will. Sometimes they literally weren't there. Sometimes it can be verbal abuse. Sometimes, unfortunately, it can be physical abuse, and further down that path of the extreme. But for those of us that grew up into this family of dysfunction, we often box the people that raised us, and we come up with a very finite and a very limiting view of these people. And what that allows us to do is compartmentalize and exercise control over them. If we can box them in to our own view, our own definition of them, our own saying, no, you're not going to hurt me anymore. You can't do that anymore. I'm going to box you in. I'm going to set up this large profile of judgment against you. And inside that box of judgment, you will sit and you will stand, because though I am no longer in your system of dysfunction, I'm not going to let you touch me. I'm not going to let you hurt me. I'm not going to let you cast aspersions upon me. I'm going to keep my distance from you. And so as we also understand or acknowledge the fact that we lie to ourselves the most, what we also then secondly need to understand and admit is that we have boxed these people in. And unfortunately, even though we think that we are boxing them in, what have we actually done? We've boxed ourselves in. We are limiting ourselves in our growth. We're keeping ourselves stuck in the past, because whatever we project or apply to someone else, in that very moment, we are guilty of the exact same thing. So if I pass judgment on someone, the reality is in that instant, in that moment of passing judgment, I'm guilty of the exact same thing that they did to me. And that's how we stay stuck. We're not willing or able or courageous enough to put on a new set of glasses, to put on a new set of eyes, to view our past in a different way. One of the ways that we could view our past is from sheer raw numbers. What do I mean by that? Reality is actually kinder than our mind. Reality is kinder than our mind. What do I mean by that? For those of you that might have had a significant, well, we have all had one. When we look back at those 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 10 significant events in our lives, those external shocks that rocked our world, and we look at, let's just pick one of them. Think about that one that you play over and over and over again. The reality is that event happened one time. Unfortunately, and I'm right there with you on this one, and so is everyone else on the planet. Some people just do it better than others. In reality, it happened once, but in our minds, we've played it through hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. And if you're old enough, like me, maybe 1 million times. The average person has 6,000 thoughts a day. 6,000. Easy math tells us that's 180,000 thoughts a month, and well over 2 million thoughts per year. Well, my dear friend, my dear friends, if your event happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you're averaging easily 2 million thoughts a year, well, shucks. Your sweet soul has had to bear the brunt of that event tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times. And neuroscience has proven to us that when we play those thoughts again in our mind, the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings, all of that, and we can even have a physical reaction, they all come back. And so we are reliving that event again and again and again. And so when we look back into our family of dysfunction, we can do the same thing with the people that we are currently holding grudges against, currently holding resentments against, currently having them boxed in, because we want to ironically prevent ourselves from getting hurt. My dear friends, we've got to let it go, because we're actually keeping ourselves boxed in. So what do we need to do? We need to admit that we sell our own selves short far more than anyone else. We need to admit that we have boxed these people in, rightfully so, in many, many ways. Rightfully so, we have boxed them in, but if we want that true peace and that true freedom and that radical harvest of transformation on the other side, then we need to become disciplined in our thoughts and let them out of that box. And we need to look at them the same way we look at ourselves, that they too have lied to themselves more than anyone else, that they too were born into a family of dysfunction, a system of dysfunction, and they too reacted poorly and they didn't know what to do, just as many of us have reacted poorly or immaturely. Or we just continue to act in ways that help us or we think helps us, building up those response muscles that have actually been detrimental because it has helped us box ourselves in. My dear friends, reality is kinder than our mind. And so what we need to do is we need to acknowledge that reality happened once, but in our mind, we have lived it thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times. And if we want to break free from these anchors of our past, if we want to break free from this generational cycle of dysfunction, then we must start changing our thoughts. We must start changing how we view not only ourselves, but others and our past. And like I said, the ways we do that is we admit that we have broken promises with ourselves more than anyone else. And therefore, we know that these people that raised us have broken promises with themselves. And just like we were born into a family of dysfunction, they too were born into a family of dysfunction. And so what we need to do is we need to be the one. We need to be the one to break the cycle of generational dysfunction. We need to make a stand. Not to get back at them, but to let them free out of that box and have mercy on them, for they didn't know what they were doing. But you've taken the step. You are stepping down the path of courage. You are stepping into the light. Light is the best disinfectant. So let's step into the light. Let's start walking down this path of freedom and peace. And one of the ways we get freedom is letting those people out of their boxes that we have put them in through our own judgment, because it's been keeping us stuck. So if we can let them go and say, man, you didn't know what you were doing. You were born into dysfunction, and I'm sorry you had it so rough when you were growing up. I'm going to take the power. I'm going to break the cycle. I'm going to start walking down this path of freedom, and I'm going to let you go so I can let go. And then what we can understand is once we get that peace and once we get that freedom and we continue to apply it into our lives more and more through daily disciplines, we can reap that radical harvest of transformation that's always on the other side of discipline. So I humbly suggest to you, friends, that you stand firm, stand tall, knowing that you are going to be the one to break the generational cycle of dysfunction. And I'm so happy and motivated by you. And I'm here to encourage you that you are not alone. Everyone has grown up in a dysfunctional family, okay? And you, my friend, you're going to be the one to break the generational cycle of dysfunction. If you've liked this content, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. I would love to hear from you. And please also subscribe to the channel where you can check out other videos that I've posted. You can also go check me out at soulshift.org where you can learn more about my coaching, my style, and my approach. And you can also click that free consultation button where you and I can connect and talk about who you are and how you got there and where you want to go and who you want to be. Because what I want for you, friend, is to live a transformed life with a transformed mindset, understanding peace, knowing freedom, and bringing those two together and applying them daily through discipline so we can all reap that radical harvest of transformation, which is always on the other side of discipline. I look forward to working with you. Thank you for being here.